Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, the master of fun and wonder, the existential Mr. Rogers. Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett here with the 247th episode of Robservations, the show about something brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And as you all know, if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com, you can punch in PGS when you check out for Post-Geek Singularity community and get 20% off your order. And you know what's great? You guys, the Post-Geek Singularity is great. That's why you should get something for your troubles. 20% off at the Lucky Tiger website. Let me tell you, I'm here because of you, imagination connoisseurs, because of you, members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. And I always have Gilbert overseeing the proceedings here, making sure that I'm doing my job, bringing you I don't know what I'm bringing you, actually, but I know that I'm bringing you something that Gilbert and Tallulah rely on. So does Elizabeth. And by the way, Elizabeth wanted to remind all of you that she is from Cleveland. And that means she's a big loser today because the Cleveland Browns lost. Actually, I have to say, they put up a valiant effort against the Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle Seahawks, but they got beat. I believe 28-32 is the final score, or 32-28 Seahawks. You know what? Got to say, though, it was kind of a squeaker there for a while. And I don't mean squeaker the way Tallulah opens her mouth and squeaks. But let's face it, Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett, and the boys, they pulled it out. They pulled out a victory. What does that make them? 5-1 now? 6-1? It's amazing. Anyway, I know you guys don't want to hear about football, but I will tell you something. I know what you do want to hear about. And what you do want to hear about, first of all, you know what? There is something I've heard this now from 3 different people over the weekend. Interesting news. Take it with a grain of salt. Take it as you will. As a lot of you might know, The Mandalorian has been using bleeding edge technology to create the Star Wars universe. Unlike, say, going over to Pinewood Studios and building enormous sets, or spending a lot of time in production on time-consuming work. Because they're making a TV show, they can't make a TV show like a movie. So what they have done is they have employed basically bleeding-edge technology to create backgrounds, to give their show scope in basically real time. I mean, it's the technology that games are moving towards, and Jon Favreau has been at the forefront of this technology, both with Jungle Book and now with The Lion King, and finally with The Mandalorian. Well, I've had this. 3 people actually have told me over the last 72 hours that The Rise of Skywalker is currently, I say currently as in right now, making use of this technology for some last-minute tweaks, last-minute additions to the film, which is pretty interesting to me. And this kind of technology is making that possible, that they can push those delivery deadlines so they can tweet. I can't even, as much as I rail on J.J. Abrams, I have to say, I do not envy the position that he's in. Anybody who watches Rise of Skywalker could be the greatest movie ever made. I can't even imagine every time they screen it for somebody, or the Disney brass, or whatever the chain of command is, there's going to be somebody that has a note. It's never going to be satisfying to everyone, because the movie has been made out to be the second coming of Jesus, or something, maybe Luke Skywalker. But there's no way they can win. There's no way that this movie is going to be, I don't know what it's supposed to be, all things to all people. But man, I would not be, even if it's a solid movie, even if it's a very good movie, it's never going to satisfy everyone. They've been touting it as the final film in the Skywalker saga. We'll see about that. But I just don't understand how anyone can expect the film to live up to every expectation. It's lucky they have the technology they can employ for The Mandalorian to go back in and do these last-minute tweaks, as opposed to, which, by the way, are here in town, out toward Manhattan Beach. They don't have to fly across the pond to merry old England to make it happen. So, but it is going on. There are tweaks, and by the way, the movie is still not opening until December 20th. So while it's tight, they still certainly can make additions. I had an addition. I had a final shot come in for Tango Shalom, believe it or not. Ben Alpe, who has a short film burning up the festival charts called Hashtag. He directed a film called Hashtag, co-written by my buddy Kevin Rubio. I have this idea for the opening title graphic, the main title graphic that says Tango Shalom on it. Last minute edition, kind of came up with it, and I asked him if he could do it using a combination of a live action plate that was taken while the movie was being shot, Tango Shalom was being shot, and then it's basically a special effect shot. He had to build a 3D model, and it's pretty neat. And it was exactly, I kind of had this vision. I pitched it to Gabe Bologna, the director, and he liked it. He didn't quite see what I was saying. I'm like, no, it'll be cool. And Ben Alpe, after a few tweaks, did a marvelous job executing it. So if you ever get a chance to see his film, Hashtag, who knows, maybe it'll show up on the Dusk Network someday, and you could watch both Skyfighter and Hashtag as a double feature, a sci-fi short double feature. Who knows? Well, I'll tell you what you can watch soon. As many people know, we are going to see The Irishman in theaters beginning November 1st, but it also, as we all know, was financed by Netflix. I believe it is the most expensive film Netflix has shown to date. There's a couple of things of note with this movie. I wouldn't expect to see a physical media release of this film. I mean, there's been a few things that Netflix has put out on physical media, but I would not imagine this will be one of them, much as I would like that, because this is a marquee title. This is part of the reason you are going to subscribe to Netflix, because Netflix wants they want Netflix to be the only place you're going to be able to see The Irishman after it leaves its brief theatrical window. So that's another reason. That's what's happening to physical media. We're seeing the rats are flying off that sinking ship, unfortunately. As much as I like collecting physical media, I've been doing it, as I've said, for 39 years. I'll be sorry to stop doing it, but I think for the most part, all of my essential movies that I need on physical media, there's always a few more. There's always new movies to buy. I mean, I have to tell you that Best Buy Infinity Saga box set for like $550 is pretty enticing, but I think I have almost all of the MCU films on 4K, with the exception of Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron. I do not have those on 4K, but who knows? I'll get around to that. But the box set could be pretty cool to get. But anyway, The Irishman played at the BFI London Film Festival today. Played today, Sunday in London. And this is a Hollywood Reporter article that was from today. It was from 6:10 a.m. this morning. And it was written by Alex Rittman. And the headline is, Martin Scorsese says cinemas are being invaded by theme park films. The director said at the London Film Festival that cinemas need to step up. Martin Scorsese has doubled down on the comments that sparked widespread debate earlier this month, actually earlier, like last week, in which he compared Marvel film. I guess it would be earlier in the month, but it's still young. We're not even halfway through October yet. In which he compared Marvel films to theme parks. Speaking at a press conference on Sunday alongside Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, ahead of The Irishman's closing night screening at the BFI London Film Festival, the director repeated the theme park line. Quote, Martin Scorsese said, "It's not cinema, it's something else," he argued. "We shouldn't be invaded by it. We need cinemas to step up and show films that are narrative films." The comments echoed sentiments he made on Saturday during BAFTA's annual David Lean lecture, claiming that movie theaters are being taken over by theme park films. Theaters have become amusement parks. That's all fine and good, but don't invade everything else in that sense, he said. That is fine and good for those who enjoy that type of film. And by the way, knowing what goes into them now, I admire what they do. It's not my kind of thing. It simply is not. It's creating another kind of audience that thinks that cinema is that. I have to say, I'm a little disappointed at Marty. I do not know Martin Scorsese. I've never met him. I did see him lecture once at LACMA long ago, live, but I've never spoken directly. He's been a hero of mine for most of my life. I mean, clearly, Taxi Driver. In the 70s, he had New York, and Taxi Driver, and these were New York, maybe not. I like it, but there's a lot of people even that before that Boxcar Bertha. I believe he was one of the editors of The Last Waltz, a documentary about the band. And then, of course, obviously moving into the 80s, it was tough. Marty's had an up and down period of time, but he really came back with Color of Money. He went from King of Comedy, and then Color of Money was his big comeback movie. And then, of course, Goodfellas and Casino. The 90s were very good to him. But he's, The Aviator, The Departed. I mean, Marty's had an incredible career. He's easily one of our greatest filmmakers. And he's a proponent of genre cinema. He began working in low-budget exploitation cinema for Roger Corman. And he is somebody that I find it interesting that he's now coming out talking about the fact that cinema, that our movies today are amusement park rides. And look, I get what he's saying. There's an incredible article, and I'm going to get into it later, that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote. As you know, I recently read an article on this channel where Kareem Abdul-Jabbar came out in favor of in favor of Walter Mosley's actions after being disciplined by HR about the Discovery debacle. And I thought he was right. And so I would like to, I'm just going to read it right now because this is pertinent. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote in the Hollywood Reporter on the 11th of October, a couple days ago. The headline is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Scorsese isn't wrong about Marvel, but he isn't right either. And here's what Kareem had to say. The director wasn't denigrating superhero films as much as stating the obvious, writes the NBA great and Hollywood Reporter columnist. Director Martin Scorsese's claim, first of all, I love that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar he wrote for Veronica Mars this season. Yes, he did. He is a staff writer on TV shows, and he's writing film columns and entertainment columns for the Hollywood Reporter and other places. I love this. He also famously played a thinly veiled version of himself in the Zucker Brothers Airplane in 1980. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a national treasure. Just saying. But here's what he had to say about this whole controversy. Director Martin Scorsese's claim to Empire magazine that Marvel films aren't cinema is like saying the novel 50 Shades of Grey isn't literature. He's technically wrong, but he's culturally right. And all of the outraged defenders of Marvel films know he's right. I include myself among Marvel's defenders as both an enthusiastic fan and recent Marvel Comics author. That's right, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is writing Marvel Comics. I've seen the entire Marvel comic universe pantheon multiple times. Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor Ragnarok are two of the most addictive movies ever made. If I'm channel surfing and even catch a glimpse of them, I'm riveted. Boy, who would have thought that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a total imagination connoisseur, or, as the late, great John Schnepp would call him, a sweaty. Not just because he spent 50 minutes dragging Walton up and down the court. But anyway, pretty nice to know. If I'm channel surfing and even catch a glimpse of them, I'm riveted. At the same time, several of Scorsese's films, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, are among my all-time favorites for their emotional power and thematic depth. I'm aware that the international popularity of the Marvel films makes them very influential in positively adjusting social attitudes about race, gender, and sexual orientation. Every time I see Black Panther, I feel a rising swell of pride because we finally have a popular black superhero and he's not just powerful, but also kind and compassionate. Captain Marvel, Black Widow, and Wonder Woman for DC are definite improvements from Barbie as role models for young girls. But influence, even for the betterment of society, isn't the issue. Scorsese wasn't denigrating Marvel films so much as making a distinction between high art, an accurate but cringeworthy term, that we might see in a museum or featured on NPR, and regular everyday art that we might see on our t-shirts and tattoos. Scorsese is stating the obvious. Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee is not on the same level as Coolidge's Dogs Playing Poker, no matter how much those dogs make us smile. Nor will Peter Benchley's novel Jaws ever match the magnificence of Herman Melville's Moby Dick, despite selling millions more copies. Captain America will never be James Baldwin. It's an important distinction to make because wrapped up in our vision of high art are the cultural ideals, moral values, and social vision that defines who we are and who we want to be. Our best art reflects our highest aspirations as well as our flawed approach in obtaining those aspirations. The angels of our reach, the devils of our grasp. High school makes many of us resistant to definitions of high art. We are forced to read poems, plays, and novels we don't understand, and then are told that there are hidden meanings that we're just not smart enough to see. We feel dumb if we can't figure out that Robert Frost's poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, isn't about stopping to appreciate a wintry wonderland, but about contemplating suicide. What the hell? Why should we have to work so hard just to read a poem or a story? Here's why. High art is basic training for teaching us to be more observant and insightful in our personal lives. People don't always do or say directly what they mean, so sometimes we have to interpret their actions and words to avoid being manipulated. We learn through unreliable narrators the excuses and justifications people make to hinder their own happiness. When we see them doing it, we can often recognize it in others and ourselves. Great art heightens our ability to see more by widening our perspectives on the world until those meanings are no longer hidden, but obvious. Popular art may thrill us, entertain us, and bring us joy, but it rarely furthers our insights or understanding of ourselves or illuminates our path to greater happiness. They're all shiny artifacts of our culture, but they don't define who we are. Celebrated British novelist and screenwriter Graham Greene, The End of the Affair, divided his fiction between entertainments and novels, with the latter being his serious art. He was making the distinction between melodrama, entertainment, and drama, art. Melodrama emphasizes plot over character, while drama, or cinema for Scorsese, emphasizes character over plot. While it's true there is much great entertainment within the melodramatic genres of mysteries, thrillers, romances, science fiction, horror, and so on, most are just straightforward stories with the main intent of exciting the reader's emotions. Fear, joy, love, hate, etc. The ride must be as exciting as possible. Once you're finished with the work, your memories will be those of exciting moments within the story, which is why Scorsese sees Marvel films as theme parks. Drama, however, focuses on how the main characters are changed or not changed by the events in the story. It asks us to examine those emotions so that we understand what they say about us. Sometimes writers are able to elevate a melodramatic genre into high art, as Graham Greene did with the thriller film The Third Man. Francis Ford Coppola did that with the gangster genre in The Godfather. Stanley Kubrick did that with science fiction in 2001: A Space Odyssey. And Robert Towne did with the detective genre in Chinatown. And Joss Whedon's Serenity, though not part of the MCU, is within Scorsese's intent. is a remarkably nuanced and thematically sophisticated film about defining good and evil and how our misperceptions can unwittingly further evil while destroying good. I mean, bruh, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar just brought up Serenity as an example of science fiction being more than simple melodrama. God love the man. I mean, this is he gets, you know what? When I eventually print up special imagination connoisseur gold stars, I'm going to send the first one to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar just because he wrote this. Let me read that again. And Joss Whedon's Serenity, though not part of the MCU, is within Scorsese's intent. Is a remarkably nuanced and thematically sophisticated film about defining good and evil and how our misperceptions can unwittingly further evil while destroying good. Deep stuff for a movie with rocket ships, laser guns, and Nathan Fillion's perfect hair. This man is a treasure. Scorsese admitted that he's never seen a Marvel movie all the way through, and I feel sorry for him that he hasn't experienced the sheer joy, humor, and excitement of these films. That he didn't see Robert Downey Jr.'s touching death scene as Iron Man, or Tom Holland's infectious wonderment at becoming Spider-Man, or the delightful banter of Hulk and Thor. Marvel films have made me laugh, cry, jump, agonize, and almost always leave the theater feeling lighter and more satisfied than when I went in. And that's not nothing. But it's also not everything. With Marvel melodrama, we feel better. With high art, we are wiser. Man, leave it to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to lay it out. I mean, lay it out flat on the court, man. This was, I love this. I think though, what's most important here is I love the fact that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has written an article strictly that was pointed right at us, right at the imagination connoisseurs that would be right at the Post-Geek Singularity, where you guys would be immediately like, Martin Scorsese, you know, one of our patron saints, one of the greatest filmmakers who's ever lived, a man who has an encyclopedic knowledge of not just movies, but pop music. I mean, Martin Scorsese is one of our great filmmakers, one of the best filmmakers who ever lived. Him and Steven Spielberg are two of the men who know how to wield a camera better than anybody who's ever lived in all of human history. Admittedly, that's not that long when you consider how long human history has been, but still. So the idea that our community, would want to take up arms against Martin Scorsese for what he's saying is sort of silly. But we all are very protective of our interests. I totally get it. But you know what? It got me thinking about what old Marty was saying. And I've said, I don't disagree with him, but I don't know. I would have come up with some highfalutin, probably less direct or less eloquently stated case. I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar nailed my feelings right there. And my whole life, I've always had to defend my own tastes in cinema. You know, how I've told people that I love science fiction, fantasy, horror, but I don't think there are any science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Well, that's not true. There's a few on my top 25 list of favorite films. But I got to thinking about what Marty was saying about the cinema and where we're at. And I want to do a little compare and contrast to see, like, everyone's always talking about, in my time, I had to walk 5 miles in snow to get to school. I just want to see. So let's take a gander at 2019, and let's take a look at the 25 most successful movies, starting from 25 to 1. Number 25 this year, Good Boys. Original film, original comedy. Number 24, Alita Battle Angel, an adaptation of a Japanese manga. Rocket Man, a Elton John phantasmagorical biopic. Hustlers, based on a true story about something that went on at Scores nightclub in New York City. The Lego Movie 2, the second part, a sequel to a movie that highly improbably was a huge hit and a delightful film, a movie about Legos. Number 20, The Upside. Number 19, Godzilla King of the Monsters, an American entry into the MonsterVerse that is a reimagining of a Japanese film franchise that's been around since the mid-50s. Glass, the third part, an original trilogy by M. Night Shyamalan, the Sham Hammer, as John Campea likes to say, that brings together both Split and Unbreakable for 20 years ago. Very improbable, made because of Jason Blum and Blumhouse, and also part of the revitalization of M. Night Shyamalan's career. Dumbo, yes, a Disney remake by Tim Burton, one of our great fantasy filmmakers. That is a live action remake of the almost 70-year-old animated film. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's love letter to late 60s Hollywood, fiercely original. Shazam, a comic book adaptation of Captain Marvel, now Shazam, the Fawcett hero. Pokemon Detective Pikachu, another very a crazy film that comes from both video games and all kinds of craziness, weird Japanese adaptation, crazy movie. Sequel, The Secret Life of Pets 2. Sequel, How to Train Your Dragon, The Hidden World. Sequel, John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. Sequel, Hobbs and Shaw Presents. That's a top 10. Hobbs and Shaw Presents. Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw is now in the top 10. Number 9 is Jordan Peele's sophomore effort, Us, totally original horror film that deals with race relations. Then we've got number 8, with a bullet, Todd Phillips' Joker. Obviously, a look at the Joker in a way we've never seen before. Owes a huge debt of gratitude to Martin Scorsese himself. Number 7 is It Chapter 2, the second film in a literary adaptation of Stephen King's seminal 1986 novel, It. 6 is Aladdin. The top 5, I'm going to say 6, Aladdin. 5, Spider-Man Far From Home. 4, Captain Marvel. 3, Toy Story 4. 2, The Lion King. And number 1, Avengers Endgame. What you have here in these top 25 movies, yes, there are many movies that Scorsese would call theme park rides, but a lot of them are sequels to long-running franchises, whether it's Avengers, Captain Marvel, Spider-Man, but we also have Fast and Furious, John Wick at Part 3. But all of these had to start somewhere. They're examples of successes that keep being successes. But I would say in this list, we have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, interesting, The Upside, Hustlers, Rocketman, Good Boys, all original films released by studios. So there's a point. I understand what Martin Scorsese is making. But The Irishman, a 3.5-hour somber, melancholy crime epic that some people are now calling Martin Scorsese's greatest film ever, was made by Netflix because the studios would not pay for it. It's amazing the movie got made. We've got a venue like Netflix that's making the movie. Now, I was thinking, okay, I see where Martin Scorsese is going, but I thought to myself, Rob, let's go back into the Wayback Machine. Maybe not the Wayback Machine, but let's go back to 1980. Let's go back to 1980. You know what? That's almost 39 years ago, almost 40 years ago. Was the cinema landscape vastly different back then or not? Let's take a gander, shall we? Coming in at number 25, David Lynch's The Elephant Man. Unbelievable piece of work, perhaps my favorite movie of his. Amazing movie. Number 24, a reissue of Disney's Lady and the Tramp. Number 23, Flash Gordon. Yes, a comic adaptation. Number 22, a remake of The Jazz Singer. Number 21, Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill, his Hitchcock homage. Number 20, one of my favorite teen comedies of the early 80s that is basically a forgotten movie, Little Darlings, with Tatum O'Neal and Christy McNichol, who go to summer camp and have a contest to see who can lose their virginity first. Number 19, Brubaker, prison film with Robert Redford. Number 18, Friday the 13th, the very first one. 17, Caddyshack. Number 16, Cheech and Chong's Next Movie, a sequel. Then there's Seems Like Old Times. Number 14, Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of who? Stephen King's The Shining. 39 years ago, we got another movie in the top 25 that is a Stephen King adaptation. Number 13, Urban Cowboy. Number 12, another comic book adaptation, Popeye. Robert Altman's adaptation of Popeye, starring Robin Williams. Number 11, the searing family drama, Ordinary People. Number 10, top 10, The Blues Brothers, Saturday Night Live feature, starring John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. Number 9, the coming-of-age teen sex fantasy, The Blue Lagoon. Number 8, Smokey and the Bandit 2. Number 7, Coal Miner's Daughter with Sissy Spacek, a biopic. Number 6, The Great Goldie Hawn in Private Benjamin, one of my favorite comedies of all time. Does this come in any other color than green? Number 5, the Clint Eastwood sequel, Any Which Way You Can. Number 4, Airplane, a Zucker Brothers comedy with who? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, amongst many, many others. Number 3, Stir Crazy, incredible comedy with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. Number 2, 9 to 5 with Jane Fonda, Goldie Hawn, and of course, why am I drawing? Dolly Parton. And of course, the number 1 movie of 1980, say it with me now, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. The populist film-going audience in the last, we can go back and look at all, but I've just read you 50 movies, 39 years apart. Really, the top 25 movies don't look that much different. Don't look that much different. You know, I think if you were to go back, I didn't go back because Box Office Mojo doesn't go back that far. But I would say that the idea that Marvel films or Disney movies are they making tons of money? Absolutely. But I would say ultimately that the movie-going tastes of the public, the populist filmmaking, is just as vibrant and it's almost the same as it's ever been. And I think this idea that what Martin Scorsese is saying, that films are turning into theme parks, is more a factor of the fact that movie making is much, much, much more expensive than it used to be. Much more expensive, including his own movie, The Irishman, that nobody would finance. No studio would finance, because what studio is going to spend $165 million or however much it wound up costing with the de-aging effects? Who's going to spend that much money to put out a movie theatrically? No one. Who would have gone to see that movie? Well, I would have, but how many people are going to run out and see The Irishman? Who knows? But you show that movie on Netflix, it'll be playing forever. And that's why Netflix made it, because you'll only be able to see it there. There's people here. Mark C is here. Mark C says, I've never shed tears over a character in a Scorsese film. Avengers Endgame had me an emotional mess. If you can make me care about a character that much, you are cinema. You know what, Mark C? That's Mark Chure, longtime imagination connoisseur, great participant here. He not only supports the channel, supports me through super chats, he also writes great letters and has great commentary. So thanks for that, Mark C. I really appreciate that. But you're bang on there, sir. And the fact is, you know, I hate to say it, but Marty, somebody who's been a staunch supporter of genre cinema, is getting it wrong here. You know, he forgot. It's just superhero movies aren't his thing. They aren't his thing. And I would defy him to sit down and watch, say, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and not see how it harkens back to 70s conspiracy thriller cinema, whether it's one of my favorite conspiracy movies of all time, The Parallax View. Alan Pakula's The Parallax View, starring Warren Beatty. Love that film. Precursor to The X-Files. If you're an X-Files fan and you haven't watched The Parallax View, well, get on it, son, as John Schnepp would say. You know, a great film, and whether it's 3 Days of the Condor, whether it's Marathon Man, whether it's even a real story, All the President's Men, Captain America: The Winter Soldier has a lot of that in there. And if you haven't watched 3 Days of Condor, or you haven't watched The Parallax View, or you haven't watched Marathon Man, I know they have been ripped off ad infinitum, and you'd probably be way ahead of those movies today. But I have to tell you, they're still great. There's even Capricorn 1 would fall under that category. Another, Peter Hyams movie about a fake mission to Mars. And yes, Mark C is correct. You have to, first of all, buy into the reality that's established by superheroes. And I, as a kid who grew up, one of the things I've said this before on the show, and a lot of people don't get this. It drives me berserk. We who love comic books, I've shown this because I haven't put it on my shelf yet, but when you read Arkham Asylum, this is the Absolute Edition, you don't sit there and think to yourself, oh, I'm looking at this artwork and slumming. I mean, Arkham Asylum 30 years later is an amazing story. It's an amazing piece of art. And one of the things that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar brings up in his editorial is you can have genre melodrama, but sometimes, as with Arkham Asylum or as with The Dark Knight Rises, comic books are no longer just melodrama, and they are high art. I would say that one of my favorite things about The Sandman, my favorite comic book series of all time, is Neil Gaiman he skirted that line all the time. Sometimes he would do an issue of The Sandman that I would say, this is high art. And then he would downshift into genre movie territory, into melodrama. That's why I love that comic so much. You never knew what you were going to get. But you have to be open to that. You have to be open to the comic book medium. Do It for Cash says, speaking of Captain America, who's your favorite player? Who's your favorite NBA player pre-90s? Well, you know what? Growing up in Seattle, the 1978-79 Seattle Supersonics with downtown Freddie Brown and Slick Watts and Jack Sikma. I mean, those are my 70s Avengers. Those are the guys, man. And I used to play basketball. I used to play boys club basketball. I sort of got out of it as I got older. Junior high school, people got really into basketball, and I didn't love basketball enough. I was never going to be that good. I was a forward, and I was never going to be as good as everybody else was. But I will say this: I started playing basketball in elementary school with Quinn Snyder, who's now the head coach. I think he's still the head coach of the Utah Jazz, right? But yeah. And Quinn Snyder led my high school basketball team, the Islanders, to a state championship in 1985. So how cool is that? Anyway, so I hope that is an answer. Stubble McShay is here. Although Scorsese may have a point, I think he's speaking out because of a frustration of not getting his type of films produced in today's cinema culture. Well, but he did get his movie produced. I mean, Netflix is a new player. Netflix and streaming services are the natural evolution of our technology. That's where we're going. And the real thing is, I understand movies as a communal experience has always been my favorite kind of thing. That's why I like to go see movies, big movies. I drag Elizabeth into Hollywood to the Cinerama Theater, where we go, and I like to see. It's not even her favorite theater. She prefers the Dolby Theater at the AMC 16 that John Campia loves. But I love the Geodesic Dome. I love being in Hollywood. I've had so many great experiences seeing movies there since I've lived in Hollywood, or since I've lived in LA for 31 years. I just love it. It feels like a church to me. It's like a holy place. So I like going to the Cinerama Dome. I even like the long ramps on either side of the theater. They circle around. When you go into that auditorium, my breath always catches in my throat a little bit. So, and I do love the presentation there. I love where we sit usually, but those Dolby theaters are really dope. Those AMC 16 theaters, pretty amazing. And that's why I saw Joker with John Campia and the fellas and Elizabeth, and it's pretty great. So yeah. But I just think, look, it's a different time, and Marty is not wrong. What Marty is missing is that we don't get enough of the high art. Studios certainly aren't making the high art anymore, and I understand that from a business standpoint. And let's face it, what do I always say? It ain't show friends, it's show business. And the studios are now in the business of making theme park rides that can be exploited against different, all across mediums, not against, but across all mediums to make the maximum bang for the buck. The studios right now, look, a streaming service can invest $160 million in making The Irishman, and they're not worried about box office. Netflix doesn't even market their movies. Everyone's going to go and watch The Irishman. They want you coming back. Look, Marianne, the French horror series that I've been watching. I didn't even know that was on. I read some article about it. Now I can't get enough. Marianne is, if you guys haven't seen Marianne, the French horror series on Netflix, do yourself a favor. James, who I met yesterday, who was on the show yesterday, wrote me a Facebook message and said how great it was and was comparing it to all of these different kinds of things. And he was absolutely right. I mean, there's Sam Raimi, there's Stephen King. There's so much in this. I mean, the main character is basically a female Stephen King. It's great. I love it. It's so good. It's so clever. But yeah, it's a lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff happening there, and you should watch it. It's just different. It's an evolution, you know, the same way that video games have been evolving. So there's a lot going on there. But Stubble's probably correct that he is frustrated. He is frustrated. I think so. I got a letter. I have so many letters, by the way, you guys. So many letters. I could be on here forever, but I got a lot of letters. First one comes from Jermaine K. Jermaine K writes, "Hello, Rob. I'm a longtime viewer of your Robservations channel on YouTube. I don't always agree with you, but I really enjoy the videos. This is my first letter, and I'm writing to you today to raise a concern I see in recent pop culture. It feels to me like some of the most beloved science fiction and fantasy stories are losing their core themes. The inspiring, hopeful characters and messages are disappearing daily to be replaced by negative, cynical alternatives. Two recent examples are the treatment of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi and the portrayal of Thomas Wayne in The Joker. Mark Hamill was quite vocal, sharing his opinions and objections to the way Luke was portrayed. When he called the character Jake Skywalker, I think that made his viewpoint rather plain. I totally agree with Hamill. Luke went from the literal embodiment of galactic hope to a lonely, cowardly hermit that was afraid to face his nephew at the end of episode 8. What the F? Why risk his life to redeem Anakin but make a move to kill Kylo because of what Kylo might become later on? Lots of Star Wars fans, including Hamill apparently, feel that wasn't Luke, and I agree. The portrayal of Thomas Wayne in Joker is just as bad, if not worse. For the movie to even hint at him being Arthur Fleck's absentee dad fundamentally changes the character from a good man, husband, and father to a manipulative jackass. Are viewers supposed to cheer when he gets shot in Crime Alley? Does he deserve it because he abandoned poor Arthur and his mom? Such questions diminish the Waynes, make their murders less tragic, and alter the origin of Batman. Anyone remember Batman, the hero of this entire story? Rob, I'm not the type to blame this trend on postmodernism or intersectionality or whatever. There are plenty of videos on YouTube that delve deeply into those opinions. I'm concerned this trend is stripping ideals like valor, honor, courage, gallantry, and bravery from our heroes, while also removing greed, ambition run amok, or cruelty and malice from the villains. These characters are archetypes meant to convey themes and be metaphors. I'd like to see them stay that way. Thanks for reading. Take care. Jermaine from New York. Well, first of all, Jermaine, glad to know you've been a lurker, but wow, if you're going to continue to write letters like this, please do so, my man. Send these in. What a great letter. Look, I would say this. It is a lot easier to write stories about corrupted good people than it is to write stories about good people fighting corruption and staying good. It's really difficult. I think one of the great things about the original Star Trek is, remember, Star Trek aired from 66 to 69. It was post death of John F. Kennedy. Vietnam, we were mired in Vietnam. Americans were watching people coming back in body bags on the nightly news every night. Civil rights was happening. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Bobby Kennedy was killed. There was the country was tearing itself apart pre-Watergate, but we were headed in that direction. And yet, Gene Roddenberry was able to make a science fiction show that was wholly optimistic. If you look at science fiction from the 10 years or 11 years that Star Trek started on the air in 1966 to when Star Wars debuted, science fiction was almost entirely dystopian. Whether it was Colossus the Forbin Project, whether it was A Boy and His Dog, whether it was Logan's Run or Rollerball or No Blade of Grass or The Final Program or The Ultimate Warrior or The Omega Man or Soylent Green, whatever it was dystopian. The future sucked. Even John Carpenter's first feature, Dark Star, that I dearly love, a student film turned into a feature. It's goofy, yes, but I do love it. It is apocalyptic in a way. And yet Star Trek shined as a beacon in an era where everything was going to hell. It's really hard to do that. Now is the perfect time to be creating a Star Trek series where we are optimistic. That's not what we're getting. I mean, Star Trek has become dystopian to the point where they completely retcon tribbles and turn them into the results of genetic experiments by a human being who wanted to use them as a food source. What the hell, man? First of all, why the hell are they retconning tribbles? Who are they? God, I hate that show. But anyway, I think, look, it's much easier in this day and age to write. All we hear about our civilization is wallowing in the muck. You know, do you ever hear about all the good our boys in blue are doing on the streets of our cities every day? Probably not. You know, you hear horrible things about officer-involved shootings or terrible stuff that's happening. We only hear about the bad priests. Yeah, and there's a lot of bad to go around. But you know what? People are more interested in the degradation of their fellow man than they are about lifting their fellow man up. And to be fair, science fiction was all about the dystopian, the darkness, basically, because if you watch, I think, a science fiction movie, it helped you cope. It's like, okay, I'm being set up to be able to deal with this. When the dystopia comes rolling down into my neighborhood, I'll feel better now because I know that Soylent Green is people. You know, it's harder to write, and it's easier to write. And by the way, it's not hip to write heroic characters acting heroically anymore. Not cool. You know, it's only cool like independent cinema. It's not cool if you make a fun comedy. You know, you got to have some kind of edgy fare in it. That's the funny thing. Look, I love my edgy fare, but Tango Shalom is a movie that has not an edgy bone in its body. It'll be interesting when I'm sure the independent film community poo-poos it as a throwback to 40s Hollywood or something. And that'll be the criticism that's leveled against the film, amongst many, I'm sure. But, you know, I'm still enamored of our movie, even though I've been working on it for a long time. I think, as you pointed out, I would rather see stories about heroes. Why do I love Steve Rogers in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Because despite everything that goes on, he did hang on to his valor and his honor. And that alone is a reason why we should respect the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Shouldn't we? Isn't that a good thing? I think it is. I'm having a little problem with my mouse. But anyway, yeah. So interesting. Mukbang Reviews is here. Mukbang Reviews says Netflix doesn't have to advertise again. Yes, you said this. You, Campia, and everyone else follows their YouTube and finds the content. You know, we do, but this French horror series, I saw a review of it somewhere that popped up in my feed and started watching it. I knew nothing about it, even though I'm ensconced in the YouTube movie pundit scene. No one had been talking about this show. It's amazing. I guess there's a Polish horror movie called Haunt or something. I got to go check that out. So yeah, I'm finding out things all the time that I don't know. Royce Freeman writes, I know film is subjective, and much like laughing at a joke is involuntary, sometimes you like films that others hate. I love the original Highlander film, which is the classic, but I also have some interest in the sequel. And to be clear, I don't like the theatrical film where they're from the planet Zeist. I love the Renegade cut where they make them from the past. Which version do you feel is the lesser of evils? Do you even like the Renegade cut? You know, I was talking about this the other day. When I saw the first movie and they're aliens, it's sort of in the shields over the earth and all that, I was like, what is this? And it looked too much like Russell Mulcahy's music video for the Wild Boys. And hey, I like the Wild Boys music video, but I felt like Russell Mulcahy was not thinking this all through. I think Highlander 2, even though they go back and they retcon it, even in it, they recut the movie, retconning it. I think Highlander 2, both versions are ill-conceived. And how do you once Connor McLeod accepts the prize, where do you go from there? I mean, it's a little hard. Highlander it was supposed to be a one-off, but it was a surprise success around the world, and they had to make another one. So I think Highlander 2 stands as one of the best examples of how sometimes you should just leave well enough alone. But then again, what do I know? There's a Highlander TV series. There's Highlander 3. So maybe somebody made money somewhere. I mean, the Highlander TV series wasn't half bad. You never know. I think there's Highlander 4 too, right? But I think it's all both. They're just ill-conceived. Not good. Mason Hawking sends in a letter. Dear Rob, I have to thank the late, great John Schnepp for introducing me to you back in the day on Collider Heroes. You and I would have been best friends growing up, even though you were long into adulthood when I was born. I'm 21, almost 22. I'm a college student who watches your channel every chance I get. I just wanted to send you this letter as a token of my appreciation. You are a remarkable personality. By the way, I didn't make that up. I was actually sent this by Mason Hawking. Mason, I'm touched that you say that. Thank you so much. It's very nice to hear that. You know, it's interesting to me when I look at YouTube analytics, my audience goes from about 20 to 55. It's on a bell curve, but it's interesting. I mean, look, I've often identified myself as an aging man child. I'm just lucky that the post-geek singularity occurred, because I would be a sad, tragic, middle-aged white man with one foot in the grave if the geeky interests did not explode on the world stage over basically the last 25 years the way they have. And remember, it's not just us dudes that made it happen. The reason that we live in the post-geek singularity is as much because of the ladies embracing geeky culture as we already had. Now, as Amy Dallin would tell you, there was always female science fiction fans, and that is true. But you know what? I went to a lot of conventions, and I went to a lot of comic book conventions and literary conventions, and the men always outnumber the women by a wide margin. You go to the San Diego Comic-Con, not true. We now live in a world where I watched it happen because of video games and anime and even comic books like The Sandman, because of characters like Death, Hot Topic, Emily the Strange, whatever it is. We have as many women in the community as men, not on this show, but it's great to have watched it. And I think that I have just as many interesting conversations with my younger viewers, and when I say younger, in their early 20s, as I do with people my own age. And I think what's great is that we live in a world where the interests in science fiction, fantasy, horror, comics, video games, the genre, I always use the term genre, the fact that it spans multi-generations. And I think that's great. I mean, despite our differences, you know, you can have three generations of a family going to Comic-Con together. Everybody's enjoying it. Everybody might like different things, but it's being surrounded by the post-geek singularity. The rest of us, it's amazing. So even though that you and I are 30 years apart, we are very much the same. And that doesn't mean we can't be friends, because why not? I think everybody who is a member of the Post-Geek Singularity can be friends. As well, we should be. But thank you for the words of praise. That's very nice of you to say. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. This next letter comes from, this is a long one, comes from Kyle A. Dear R&B, the letter I have for you today may be applauded by some and laughed at by others. Best kind of letter, Kyle. However, I don't care what anyone thinks as long as they listen. I will begin by asking the question that is the basis of this letter and one that will truly ruffle some feathers. Is Suicide Squad one of the greatest comic book films ever made? Well, let me quickly answer your question. No, but I will allow you to go on. This question became known to me the other day when I was rewatching Suicide Squad since I hadn't seen it in a while. I originally planned on just watching the Joker scenes because I find Jared Leto's Joker to be massively underrated and not talked about enough. But 2 minutes into the film, I was hypnotized once again, and 2 hours later, I had rewatched Suicide Squad. Rob, I freaking love this film. The best part about it is how crazy and balls to the wall insane it actually is. It's about a team consisting of a hitman, a serial killer, a killer crocodile man, a man with boomerangs, and a man who can turn into a fire god. The team has to go up against a witch, her brother, and Viola Davis. If that's not a crazy enough plot for you, then I don't know what is. Fans love to talk about how the Guardians of the Galaxy was a truly ambitious film for the MCU to take part in, and I definitely agree. But I think that a lot of people forget to acknowledge how ambitious Suicide Squad was. The title alone isn't something that parents would want to see on a McDonald's Happy Meal toy. But DC, despite how much it gets bashed on, isn't afraid to take risks. I love how you always say that Grace Kelly in Rear Window is your movie dream girl. Time to make you jealous, Rob. My 99-year-old grandmother actually used to see Grace Kelly walk into the store next to the store she worked at in Ocean City, New Jersey on the boardwalk. By the way, I used to date somebody from Ocean City. She was actually Miss New Jersey and competed in the Miss America pageant. Take that to the bank. She also used to drive by her house and see Prince Rainier in the driveway. Anyway, why do I bring this up? I believe that Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn is my dream movie girlfriend. You know what? I like that because now I can also remind people that my second favorite dream movie girl is Catherine Trammell, who is a psychopathic murderer. So you and I apparently park our shuttlecraft in the same shuttle bay because Harley Quinn is that too. That may be a bit of an unhealthy thing to say, but it's true. Technically, any movie Margot is in, she is my dream movie girlfriend, especially in Wolf of Wall Street. But her Harley was a match made in heaven. I find all of the actors to be giving great performances in Suicide Squad. Margot's Harley is a victim of abuse and a toxic relationship that truly makes the end of the film kind of heartbreaking. On this rewatch, I noticed that the entire film, from beginning to end, is Harley psychoanalyzing all of the people around her. Margot stated in interviews something that really grabbed my attention, and that she wondered if Harley is actually pretending to be crazy so that way she can continue what she loves and figures out what makes people tick. If you look at the scene when the group has their heart-to-heart in the bar, it's Harley who is on the other side of the counter. She is their therapist. They are her patients. There is also this great part to her performance. Whenever somebody sees her on the inside, she tries to cover up her vulnerability. Will Smith plays a great Deadshot, and his relationship with his daughter is funny and heartbreaking at the same time. Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag may be my favorite character since he just oozes cool and golfs with a 3 handicap. I find the team to have excellent chemistry, and the film only gets better when they're together. As I said before, Jared Leto's Joker, I find to be very interesting. The idea to make Joker essentially a gangster pimp was an eyebrow-raising idea, but I really liked it. He's unpredictable and has almost a cat-like ferocity to him. The action is great. Watching Deadshot go to town on those monsters always gives me chills. It should be noted that many of them use practical effects, which is something you don't see in many team-up films these days. The score is exceptional. Also, I find the themes of family and loss to be quite powerful. And yes, they are pretty much the same themes from Guardians. Many point out how poor the editing is in Suicide Squad. Some of the worst, by the way, I've ever seen, if you'll allow me to editorialize. And I can see where the critique comes from, but it doesn't ruin the film for me. If anything, it makes it even more enjoyable on rewatch. It makes the film move at a fast pace, and the hundreds and hundreds of songs that are played over each character's intro entertains me. An interesting thing to note is James Gunn's unintentional connection to the first Suicide Squad. Norman Greenbaum's Spirit in the Sky was played in the trailers for Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was included on the soundtrack. However, the song was not played in the film. In Suicide Squad, Spirit in the Sky is played, but it is not featured on the soundtrack. I thought that's an interesting bit of trivia. I saw Suicide Squad twice in theaters, and it was the second time where I asked myself if that was one of my favorite comic book films, and it is. My current ranking for the DCEU films would be Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad, Batman v Superman, Shazam, Justice League, and at the very bottom, Aquaman. Man of Steel gets enough love from John and Wonder Woman from everyone else, so I thought it was time I paid some respect to Suicide Squad. I am beyond excited to see Birds of Prey and the Suicide Squad. In the meantime, I'll just watch Suicide Squad again, and if anyone tells me I shouldn't love Suicide Squad, I'll just wave that Oscar right in their face. Thank you, and please be kind. Sincerely, Kyle A. Well, Kyle, I know you've written to me letters before, and they're always good letters. And, you know, I do want to say, here's the thing. I think Suicide Squad, the thing that I object to it most is it was taken away from the filmmaker, David Ayer. And to me, the film lacks authorship. It lacks there's no point of view. And when you bring in a trailer company to hack apart dramatic scenes, I can't get into them. There's scenes in it. There's a dinner scene at the beginning I can't even watch. It's so badly edited. I hate the film. I hate the film with every fiber of my existence, and I never want to see it again. However, let me just say that you have taken something out of it. You get something out of it. You find a lot of it enjoyable. Never let anyone take that away from you, because even though I believe Suicide Squad is an objectively bad film, I do think that your opinion, as is everyone's, is subjective. And look, I have tried to explain my love of Fritz Kirsch's Tough Turf and my love of Luigi Cozzi's Star Crash to many people, or Lewis Coates, if you want to believe the American credits. Star Crash is not a good movie. Tough Turf, I think I could make an argument it is. But Star Crash is not necessarily a good movie, but I love it. I love it. And a lot of people have taken me to task. They're like, how can you love Star Crash? I could sit here and give you an hour-long dissertation about why I love Star Crash, but I recognize that not a lot of people are going to watch Star Crash and go, man, that was awesome. And for me, I think Suicide Squad is not a great film because it was taken away from the author and basically destroyed. But for what's there, if you like it, here's my thing. Like it with every fiber of your existence. Passionately love it, in fact. And nobody should be able to tell you that it is not something that you love. And you even recognize its faults, so that's okay. I mean, you know, we all love things that have lots of faults, whether it's people, whether it's movies, whether it's sporting teams, you know. I mean, there's no reason why you can't love things that aren't necessarily the best things in the world. If you enjoy it, that's all that matters. And at the end of the day, that's all that should matter to anybody. Who cares what some movie pundit's going to tell you? If I tell you that I think Suicide Squad's hot garbage, you should say, you know what, Rob? I appreciate you feel that way, and I understand that you do, but I love the film. Stand behind your convictions. Never let anybody tell you not to love what you love, even though this is the internet and everybody will tell you what you shouldn't love. But don't listen to them. Let's see. Here's another letter. Thomas Blair says, hi, Rob. I'm about to ask you something which I'm well aware you may have been asked many times over, but I hope you are willing to either respond via message, post this to your site with your response, or possibly even respond in an upcoming video. You know what? I just can't respond to you in an upcoming video. My question below is as much for my edification as it is for others who have similar questions, so I hope to see your feedback in some form. You may use this message in any way you see fit, and you have my permission to post it or read it if you deem it interesting enough to do so. I sure hope that it is. My name is Tom, and I'm writing to you because I've recently discovered your YouTube channel a few months ago. I really enjoy your videos and especially enjoy your insights on classic sci-fi and horror movies. I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s, and I've been a longtime fan of Star Wars, Star Trek, and if you name a sci-fi franchise with the word star in it, chances are I'm a fan. In recent years, I've been finding that modern movies fail to hold my interest, So I've been discovering or rediscovering classic movies going back to the 30s. This includes the Hammer films, Kubrick, Harryhausen, William Castle, Cronenberg, and Roger Corman films, especially with Vincent Price, film noir, 40s to 70s dramas, and a variety of other Criterion films. This year, I've been rediscovering 60s and 70s sci-fi. And thanks to some of your videos, I've discovered films I'd not heard of or had forgotten. I was wondering if, at your convenience, you might offer some additional suggestions, especially for sci-fi films or TV series from the 60s to early 80s, with special emphasis on the 1970s that are a bit more obscure. If I may, I'd like to list a few sci-fi movies and shows I've compiled and I'm in the process of watching or rewatching. I would love to hear your input on additional films or shows similar to what I'm listing below. Here is my list, some of which you've mentioned in your videos, and I have listened. Here's his list. Let me just say, I'm impressed with this list, Thomas. But here's his list of 60s and 70s sci-fi. Space 1999, Planet of the Apes, the TV series and the original films, Demon Seed, Colossus the Forbin Project, The Omega Man, Soylent Green, the Logan's Run movie and TV series, The Man from Atlantis, Earth 2, Genesis 2, Planet Earth, Strange New World, Westworld, Rollerball, Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, Saturn 3, Tron, The Black Hole. Tron's actually 80s. So is Saturn 3, I think. Saturn 3 is 1980. The Black Hole, that's 79. Zardoz, The Quester Tapes, Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, Battlestar Galactica, Andromeda Strain V, that's 83. The Swarm, take that off your list. Phase 4, Kingdom of the Spiders, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. First of all, I know there's a lot of you going, wait a minute, weren't you going to do a horror show today? Weren't you going to have your Halloween recommendations? You know, I was, and Elizabeth saw me pulling titles that I was going to use and show you, and I finally just was overwhelmed by my own collection, and I'm like, you know what? I need a little bit more time to contemplate my horror. Maybe I'll do it in a couple days. But this is a very fine list, Tom. All of these things are good. I would take The Swarm off of it because it's just a bad movie. There are other things. There's a couple of, like, I'm a huge fan. There's no Asian science fiction here. I mean, I would say check out a movie called The Green Slime or Matango. Is it Matango? Matango, the Mushroom People, believe it or not. Gorath is another one. There's a Japanese movie called Virus, if you can find it. End of the World film, really interesting. I mean, Hausu, that's a horror film. And again, one of the most bonkers science fiction movies ever, 1965, Wild Wild Planet. Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires. I would add that to the list. And if you're going to go Mario Bava, just throw in Danger Diabolic or Diabolic just for fun. Barbarella, Modesty Blaze, which is kind of a spy movie, but yeah, this is a very, very good list. I would say Carpenter's Dark Star. You've got if you can find these movies. I'm a big fan of a filmmaker named Peter Watkins, who directed a movie called Gladiators or Gladiatorina, which is really interesting. There's a movie, I think it's early 80s, but it's called, in America, it was called Escape 2000, or here it was called, it's Australian. The original title was Turkey Shoot, but that might be early 80s. Of course, the original Mad Max, I would go check out. This is a great list. You got some of my favorites on here. Obviously, Zardoz. I'm a huge Zardoz fan. I really like early 70s. The Final Program, like I said earlier before, you should watch that. No Blade of Grass, The Ultimate Warrior. Those are early 70s films. Of course, Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I dearly love. But I think this is a great list. You know, I think what's really interesting is these movies are interesting. Like when you go back and you watch Soylent Green, it's basically a detective thriller, but the sci-fi elements in it are interesting. I mean, they're just a lot more thought-provoking. I mean, you're in a different mindset. It's so funny. Like, I never thought when I was a kid that Rollerball would be considered maybe high art. And there's a lot of people that find it interminable, but I love Rollerball. I love the idea of corporate society, like, you know, they've won basically, and that there's this bloodthirsty game like Rollerball that placates the masses, and you can't be heroic. in the game, and if you are, they have to destroy you because no one man or one woman can be more. Although it's very much a patriarchal society. There's a lot of all of these movies, like Andromeda Strain. Robert Wise directed it. So great. Yeah, I mean, all of these are great choices. TV. I mean, look at them all. You know, Demon Seed. Donald Cammell. What a great movie. I love Demon Seed. Crazy. You got Colossus, the Forbidden Project. It's a great. By the way, if you're gonna watch Space 1999, you have to watch UFO, Jerry Anderson's live action show. It's only 26 episodes. I think UFO, from what I heard, is streaming on Amazon Prime, or maybe they took it off. I'm not sure. UFO, check it out. But I want to thank you for writing in. What a great list you've sent in. I like that list. Can't go wrong with any of those. You're gonna have a lot of fun. A lot of fun actually. Watching those movies. Mukbang Reviews throws in Post-Geek Singularity Union Dues. Support this channel and its fascinating content. I love the live chat. Well, you know what? I someday I'm going to have somebody come in and host this show for me, just so I can go in the live chat and see if I can get the moderators to ban me. I think I want to do that. I think it'd be kind of fun. Mukbang Reviews says your live chat is talking Mandingo, not Matango, the mushroom people. Mandingo is it's basically a movie about jungle fever. I have seen Mandingo, and it's not exactly the most politically correct film of all. But, you know, I know from Rudy Ray Moore, that Rudy Ray Moore is the character that Eddie Murphy is playing. He's playing Rudy Ray Moore in My Name is Dolomite is My Name. And as we all know from the sequel to Dolomite, which I think it's the second Dolomite movie, The Human Tornado, even in the trailer, Rudy Ray Moore says he's got a dong as big as King Kong. So, you know, I can understand why Mandingo, you know, was the thing. I myself am not equipped with a porn cock. I wish I was, but I'm not. You know, that's why I have to become a cunning linguist. That's why I learned early on. But you know what? People have always been satisfied. So what can I tell you? But yes, Mandingo, boy, Paramount released Mandingo. And I don't know what to say about that movie. But anyway, you know what? Here's the one thing I think is great. What I think is great about the world that we live in is you can sleep with anybody you want now, and nobody's going to pillory you for it. And whatever your thing is, you can just, whether you're in RedTube or Pornhub or whatever, you just type in what you want and you can get it, which is kind of like being in Logan's Run. Because if you remember in Logan's Run, Michael York as a Sandman, you literally could dial up whomever you want and they're beamed to your room. And then you throw up these balls that explode and fill your wherever you are with pink sex gas. And you know, get your bump, chicka, brown, brown, shooky on whatever you want to do, whatever was going on there. And, you know, who am I to judge? I'm all about shooky in all of its myriad forms. So my whole thing is this. Whatever you want to do, I look at it this way. I look at human sexuality as an extension of being an imagination connoisseur, because if you really think about it, it's such a simple as Kalinda said in the Star Trek episode By Any Other Name, and one of the hottest women ever to appear on Star Trek. Who cares if in her original form she was a giant tentacled monster? Barbara Boucher is who played her in the episode, one of the most beautiful women ever. And she didn't quite understand the mechanical, physical act of love that human beings have written and talked about and obsess over so much. So, you know, Kirk showed her what was up. And if James Kirk can find his way to making love to a tentacled alien that doesn't look anything like a human being, that has just taken human form from the Andromeda galaxy, who am I to judge what anybody likes? I mean, if you think about it, all of human sexuality, it all comes out of the imagination. Sure, you know, it's all about it really is. I mean, you know what? I scratched the webbing in my fingers. Oh, it feels so good. How is that different from scratching any other place you like to be scratched? I don't know. We just put too much in it. I'm just happy people are whatever myriad form you enjoy getting it on in, with whomever, with however, whatever you want to do, as long as you're all two consenting adults, or three or four, or whatever polyamorous trysts you get yourself into. as long as it's all consensual, I think it's great because you're using your imaginations the whole time. And isn't that the name of the game? So if you guys want to talk Mandingo, although I do think it's racist, actually, you don't want to be racist, but you should be getting what you want. You know, it's like there's the great Risky Business. Risky Business is my all-time 80s favorite teen comedy. And when Tom Cruise's character accidentally orders a transvestite to come to his house, she explains it very simply. She says, you know, if you what does she say? You don't get she basically uses two electronic brand names, and one of them was RCA. And she says, you should get what you want. You know, if you want RCA, then you should get RCA. And she says, she gives Joel Goodson, Tom Cruise's character, a number for Lana. And Lana is, of course, Rebecca De Mornay. That's what Joel wanted. But what was great about it was there was no judgment there. I mean, there was a little judgment there, but everybody, you know, they came to an accommodation and everybody got what they wanted in the end. That's how life should be. Anyway, but, you know, Matango is a different movie than Mandingo. And I think Matango is one of the more interesting Japanese horror sci-fi films. And I think that people should look into that. Matango is an interesting film. I quite enjoyed it. And I own it. I own Matango. Cal Kamel from Swack Props is here. The man Cal. I haven't read a letter from Cal in a while. Good to have Cal back into the fold. Hi, Rob. The recent discussions, by the way, I hope the moderators are dealing with the fallout. Hi, Rob. The recent discussions on the regression of the Star Trek franchise, starting with J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot, which continues on with Star Trek Discovery, as well as hearing about your proposed Star Trek Federation show, got me thinking. Would Star Trek have been in a better state if Paramount had gone ahead with Eric Judrinson's Star Trek The Beginning instead of Abrams' reboot? I remember reading about this project on Ain't It Cool News back in 2007 or 2008. For the benefit of fellow imagination connoisseurs who aren't familiar with it, Star Trek The Beginning was proposed by Rick Berman and a production team, which included Jordan Kerner and Carey McCluggage, as a trilogy of movies that would bridge the gap between Star Trek Enterprise and Star Trek The Original Series. Eric Judrinson, the scribe of the hit HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, was brought in to develop the concept, and he came up with a first draft screenplay that ran 120 plus pages. Supposedly, the story is set 4 years after the events depicted in the Enterprise episodes Demons and Terra Prime, which I still consider as the series finale. If you get my drift, I do too. There's an Earth-based military organization called the United Earth Stellar Navy, UESN, which was potentially merging with Starfleet and which would essentially militarize the exploration-based ladder. And this is where the primary protagonist comes in the form of UESN's top gun named Tiberius Chase. No guesses who he's going to be related to. Apparently, his attempts to join Starfleet were blocked because of his family's bad reputation, his dad being a member of a xenophobic Terran isolationist group that follows the teachings of Colonel Green from the Savage Curtain. He was also due to test the NX Omega, the first Warp 8 vessel, but due to his bad name, someone else got chosen instead. Plus, he's romantically involved with Penelope, a school teacher from Iowa who also happens to be the daughter of Admiral Garner from Enterprise. But this was just a setup for the movie's main event, the Earth-Romulan War, first discussed in Balance of Terror, beginning with a sneak attack on Earth by a Romulan control ship and a massive fleet of drone ships. This was supposed to be a full-on war movie, hence Judrinson's hiring, to show the events that will lead to the founding of the Federation as we know it. The script's structure resembles those of World War II films, and its story and setting is darker and more militaristic than traditional Trek. Think Starship Troopers meets Pearl Harbor, according to AICN, in Cool News. Although Enterprise is mentioned in the script, we don't see it or its crew, as apparently they were in Risa at the time of the attack, but we do get the return of secondary characters like Admiral Gardner and Shran. Any excuse to see Jeffrey Combs back in a Star Trek setting is always good, right? Also in the script is Skan, Sarek's father, who serves as Vulcan's ambassador to Earth. Sadly, the project never got off the ground after the regime change at Paramount, and instead we got J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot. Would Star Trek The Beginning have been a better series of movies compared to the Kelvinverse trilogy? it probably would have been with a writer of Jedrinson's caliber and Rick Berman's supervision. Personally, though, when I heard it was set between Enterprise and TOS, I thought another prequel. Its close association with Enterprise was also a bit of a turnoff at the time, especially after Rick Berman and Brandon Braga pissed on Manny Coto's good work on the Enterprise's 4th season with the expletive deleted, bad finale, These Are the Voyages. My fellow Malaysian Trekkies and I had a viewing party when that episode aired, and the barrage of curse words and colorful metaphors coming out of our mouths as the credits rolled was epic to say the least, and could probably only be topped by our reaction in a viewing party of any of Discovery's episodes. Thankfully, we saw fit not to organize any. But in a post-Kelvinverse and Discovery world, I'm left to ponder if Jedrinson's tale of the Romulan War would have been more of a Star Trek than what we ended up with, or was it a missed opportunity for sure? What are your thoughts, Rob? Sincerely, Cal, aka Swag Props. Well, Cal is correct. Rick Berman was developing after Enterprise the Star Trek The Beginning script, which was, as Cal basically he laid it right on the line correctly, it was a war film that was going to deal with the Romulan War. And I have the script. We were talking about it, or I don't know if we talked about it yet. We were going to talk about it on Inglorious Treksperts. I think they might have done an episode about it. We did, that was already aired. By the way, if you guys don't listen to the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, I do it. I'm on a frequent guest on Mark A. Altman's and Darren Doctorman's, two old friends of mine. They do a great podcast called the Inglorious Treksperts. We've covered a lot of different things on that show. We've had many Star Trek luminaries, including producers of all the different Star Trek shows. Walter Koenig recently appeared. We did a show which was great with a Paramount publicist named Eddie Egan, who actually got me into Star Trek 3 back in the day. I was actually able to thank him 35 years later, face to face. So Inglorious Treksperts is available wherever wherever you get your podcast from, you can get Inglorious Treksperts. It's a lot of fun. And there's there's over 50 episodes now, which is very, very cool. You know, I thought Star Trek The Beginning, I recently reread the script. It's pretty good. You know, I'll send you, if you don't tell anybody, I'll send you the script. It's pretty good. I liked it. I don't know if it, again, the prequel thing was a problem. And you know, here was my problem with Brandon Braga and Rick Berman from a storytelling standpoint. Were probably the two men, I mean, they were making money, so why wouldn't you do this? But they didn't necessarily love Star Trek. They didn't love Star Trek. They liked the fact that it kept them employed. And you know, Brandon Braga, his ideas were always pretty out there. You know, his ideas were more along the body horror. And he did. Look, he co-wrote Generations and co-wrote First Contact, and he wrote a number of great Star Trek episodes with Ron Moore and on his own. But he was more, I always wanted to, he did a one season horror sci-fi series. I forget what it was called, Sphere or something like that. But I wanted to see him go more in that direction. And I think he would have made a great horror series. Like he did Salem. And he's on the Orville, back on the Star Trek-esque train. But I would like to have seen, it would have been nice to see somebody else take a crack at it. I would love to have seen a showrunner come in or a movie maker come in that just really loved Star Trek and knew their Star Trek, really knew the franchise, to see what they would have done. Again, I go back to Ryan Coogler with Creed. That's what I would really like to see, and we haven't had that. And the problem is, I mean, as evidenced by the short trek, I get it. There's people that like the latest short trek, but my God, I mean, why do you have to go back and ruin? You know, you go back to first of all, let's ruin Spock, let's ruin the Tribbles. I mean, everything has to be like changed. Like, leave it alone. Do something original. Plant your own flag. You know, I mean, at least Next Generation waited 3 seasons before they brought Sarek onto the show. God, I want to punch someone in the face. I mean, even the new Picard series, look, I want it to be good. I do, but is there anything original in it? Anything? Everything? They're just drawing on everything that came before. Drives me crazy. Anyways, you all know. But yeah, I think it would have been interesting. I definitely would have taken Star Trek into a different, especially if it was done seriously and more realistically, maybe a Saving Private Ryan vibe to it. It could have been really interesting. I don't know. Movie Fanobi says, "Hey Rob, Just got out of the Alien 40th anniversary with Mom playing at AMC. Crowd was mostly quiet. Wow. I have even more appreciation for this movie. Now, Movie Fanobi, had you seen it in the theater before? Because Alien is a truly overwhelming experience in the theater. And you went with Mom. I love that you took your mom. Movie Fanobi says, in theater 13 on my birthday today, 13. Perfect for Mom and I. She insists I saw it in the theater with her at 7. Scared me. The toy scared me? Oh, the toy scared you. The toy, yeah. How great. How great was it that they made a giant alien for Christmas one year? Kenner did. That was one of my favorite toys I ever had in my life. So it's canon, and I'm old. Laugh out loud. Well, Movie Fanobi, I love that you went back with your mom. Thanks again for supporting the channel. That is amazing. You know, what's interesting to me, aside from the computer displays, which don't bother me because maybe that's just the computer displays they had in the ship in the Nostromo, Alien to me is a pretty perfect film. I love the movie. It's so brilliantly done. The 1-2 punch of Alien and Blade Runner, I don't think has still, in terms of the verisimilitude. I mean, Alien is perhaps there is not another science fiction film that has as much verisimilitude as Alien does. It's unbelievable. The film, it casts such a spell, and it's so great seeing a theater. And people forget, like at the end, when the Nostromo, when the self-destruct has been set, and the pulsating lights, the strobe lights in the corridors. I mean, it's amazing that one shot when Sigourney Weaver turns her head to look. I mean, it's so good. Oh, that movie is so good. I love Alien so much. It's I can't believe it's 40 years old, but it still hasn't been surpassed. Certainly not by Ridley himself. I mean, you watch Alien, then you watch Prometheus and Covenant, and you're like, dude. But then again, I will say this. I think The Martian, especially the long version, is easily one of my most enjoyable motion pictures I've ever seen. I love The Martian, and I would say that Blade Runner, Alien, and The Martian are right up there. I mean, that to me is Ridley Scott's sci-fi trifecta. It really is. I'm glad you went and saw it in the theater. That's totally awesome. I love that they're putting these things back in the theater, if only for a short period of time. Mukbang Reviews says, will you be on tomorrow? It's a holiday. But also, have you seen The Manitou, 1978? Oh my God. Let me just tell you how much I love The Manitou. The last film directed by the late, great William Girdler, who later, after directing Day of the Animals, he passed away. For those of you who have not seen 1978's The Manitou is an adaptation. It is an adaptation of Graham Masterton's first novel about Misquamacus. And a lot of Graham Masterton's horror novels are about different cultures. Like his novel Tengu is about a Japanese demon that ends up blowing up the San Onofre nuclear power plant here in Southern California to take revenge on the U.S. for Pearl Harbor. But The Manitou is amazing. I love The Manitou. The book is amazing. He's written a number of Manitou books, including Revenge of the Manitou, where 22 medicine men come back, led by Misquamacus, and of course, Burial, where Indian medicine men are pulling down Chicago skyscrapers. I love Graham Masterton. Graham Masterton, I wouldn't call him a guilty pleasure, because Graham Masterton's my favorite kind of author. He wrote sex manuals, like real sex manuals, and he also wrote horror novels. And he wrote all kinds of, here's why I loved reading horror novels, wholly inappropriate horror novels when I was a kid. I love the graphic violence and I love the graphic sex. Give me a great sex scene in a horror novel. And Graham Masterton wrote a lot of good ones. And I found out later because he wrote sex manuals. So his books are great. Not all of them, but a lot of them are great. But so the plot of The Manitou is basically about an Indian medicine man being reincarnated, and he's basically a fetus that is growing on the back, like on the back of her neck, of a woman. And he's gonna burst forth full grown out of her back, which is in itself crazy. What a crazy idea. Well, so when she goes into the hospital to see what's up and they start x-raying this thing, they damage him. It screws him up. The radiation screws up McCormack. And in the movie, like in the book, he is born deformed and pissed off, and he has supernatural powers. The movie is kind of a hoot. Michael Ansara, who played Kang in the Star Trek episode Day of the Dove, plays John Singing Rock, an Indian medicine man. And of course, the great Tony Curtis from movies like Some Like It Hot, one of my favorite movies ever, The Sweet Smell of Success, plays Harry Erskine, who is basically a psychic debunker. And they end up taking on McCormack, and hijinks ensue. And I love the Manitou. It was put out by Shout Factory, I think this year. They put out the Blu-ray, but they unfortunately could not find the original negative. But I love this franchise. I thought it was so great. And the movie's goofy. You could tell it was totally influenced by Star Wars, because basically the climax takes place, even though it's still inside a hospital, it takes place in space. I love the Manitou. I love the books. And it had a great tagline: evil does not die. It waits to be reborn. So good. I mean, it's not so good, but as far as B-horror goes, if I could make a Blumhouse movie, if I could remake any horror franchise, if I could go back, and I would do the Manitou. I love the Manitou. I would want to make Revenge of the Manitou and Burial. That would be that would be my, if anyone ever if Jason Blum knocked on my door, I would remake the Manitou. That's what I would want to. I love the Manitou. I love the books. I love Indian medicine men. It would be great. And yes, I Mukbang Reviews, I want to thank you for talking about the Manitou. I'm glad we got a Blu-ray of it. It's not as sharp, and it doesn't look as good as, of course, something would if you use the original negative. I'm just glad that we, in fact, were able to get the Manitou on Blu-ray, because damn, do I love that movie. Mark C says, watched The Joker again. Listening to the backlash makes me wonder, does the U.S. have a gun problem or a mental health crisis? Not trying to create anger, just a thought. I think what the U.S. has currently is a maturity crisis. I think the United States, we have forgotten how to be mature adults, and part of a lot of our problems are because we have no more common sense, and we're being played. It's funny. Somebody asked me, "Do you believe?" I tweeted about how the American government, we're all being played like the gold fiddle that the devil promises the kid in the Charlie Daniels song, "The Devil Went Down to Georgia." Devil went down to Georgia. He was looking for a soul to steal, and he was in a bind because he was way behind. He was looking to make a deal when he came across a young boy sewing on the fiddle and playing it hot. The devil jumped upon a hickory stump and said, "Boy, let me tell you what. Guess you didn't know it, but I'm a fiddle player too. And if you care to take a dare, I'd make a bet with you. Now you play a pretty good fiddle, boy, but give the devil his due. I'll bet a fiddle of gold against your souls to think I'm better than you." Boy said, "My name's Johnny." And anyway, you get the idea. I love that song. But there you go. Some Charlie Daniels band for you here on Robservations. Why I'll get flagged for monetization right now. But I do think we're all being played. We are no longer adults. We are children. We need to become more mature and have real mature conversations about these things and discuss the ramifications. Real mature adults would be able to say, "Hey, I have no problem with a 6-month licensing period for firearms." That way people can be checked out mentally. They can be checked out physically. More importantly, they can be checked out on guns and gun safety. Like, what's wrong with that? I love that I constantly am being thrown back. We need our guns, so the government is in case the government comes to take them away. Has that ever happened in the history of America? In your lifetime, has anyone come knocking door to door to take your guns away by force? I mean, it's so silly. We have a maturity issue, and you know what it's like when you're in elementary school and one kid acts out and ruins it for the entire class. Well, that's where we're at. But I think we have a maturity issue. I really do. And like reading all these, what's really funny is there's nothing. The Joker is about the creation of a bad guy. Now, do I think that a movie that deals with mental illness is, look, there's plenty of movies that talk about how people with who are mentally ill get better. I'll go look at One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest deals with mental illness head on, but it's not necessarily pillorying anyone who has mental illness. It's about a power struggle between a man who, R.P. McMurphy, and Nurse Ratched. It's just the milieu deals with mental illness, and it has a lot to say. But it's just so strange. I think we have a mental health and a maturity issue problem in this country across the board, Mark. By the way, thanks again for supporting the channel. I very much appreciate that you do. But yeah, I mean, there's a backlash for everything. You know, I'm sure somebody's going to, it's so funny. Somebody took me to task. Well, speaking of Joker, our man Paul in Long Beach is back. He hasn't written in a while, but he's got 2 letters. Morning, Rob. My thoughts this week are regarding the lasting legacy of Joker will be on the genre. Honestly, I think the answer is 0. I found the film to be pedestrian and repetitive. The fact that almost every reviewer needed to compare it to a Scorsese film or two kind of proves my point. If the movie was an indie named Fred and followed the plot of Basket Case, would we be lauding its existential genius, as some have suggested? I think not. But in a way, that's exactly what the plot of the film reveals. To me, it was far more Shutter Island than Taxi Driver. Never, not once, did I think Joker was anywhere on par with the Marty movies of which it's been compared. Nor do I, by the way. Now, I absolutely must agree with moderator Terry Flynn. Every time you say we park our shuttlecraft, I can only hope you've prepared the KY because it's tight in there. Wow, a lot of sexual innuendo on this show today. Cheers, Paul, and cheers to you. Thank you, Paul. I love that you have written me this letter about Joker. And by the way, let me see if I can find it. Paul in Long Beach wrote another letter today, and I'm going to read it. Okay, Rob, after yesterday's letter, I thought to myself, am I being too hard on this movie? So one of my golf buddies and I went to an 11 a.m. showing on Saturday. We have an AMC on one side of town and the Cinemark across from the convention center where you were during the summer. My buddy lives in Garden Grove, so I ended up at the Regal in Orange County. Let me start off by saying, F you, Regal. 25 minutes of trailers and 2 Regal commercials may have soured my attitude toward any movie, much less one that I already thought was overrated. That being said, upon further reflection, I really don't think I was too critical. I mostly agree with the general positives placed forward by reviewers, but again, I thought the movie was just okay. Joaquin Phoenix was phenomenal. The score and cinematography were top-notch. For me, it just wasn't any kind of groundbreaking film. Paul in Long Beach. Yet, Paul, you went and saw it twice very quickly. You know, I don't think Joker's any transcendent movie because it's basically a pastiche and it's an amalgamation of other things that we've seen before. That said, I think it's a beautifully made movie, and the fact that it uses Joker as a jumping off point is what's really important. And there's a lot of cinema goers who, for the very first time, you know, I always forget I have water, and I'm like, why I talk for... A lot of young moviegoers haven't ever seen a movie like this before. I mean, I love that. Here's another movie. Go watch Basket Case. If you haven't watched Basket Case, it's you got to watch it. It's a great example of sleazy early 80s low budget cinema that I used to love. But yeah, it doesn't get made like that anymore. But I think, Paul, you're right. I mean, anybody who's seen these movies, it's not the greatest movie in the world, but I think it's interesting that it exists. And a lot of people are encountering movies. You know, everything is cyclical. And if you didn't grow up with Taxi Driver and you didn't grow up with King of Comedy, and look, even when you go back and you watch those, if you saw Joker and it blew your mind, because of the time they were made, you might, although even the opening credits of Taxi Driver immediately announce how amazing the film is. But, you know, Joker, your mind's going to be more open to that than Taxi Driver. And now that you've heard that, oh, it just rips off Taxi Driver, you're going to go in and be like, well, no, it doesn't. Well, it does. But what's great is we have a whole generation of film goers that are experiencing a movie like Joker for the first time. And that's what's really cool. At least I'd like to think so. I want to thank you, Paul, once again for writing in. Here's a funny letter. This letter is from Mark Scarbeck. Hi, Rob. I'm warning you, I'm going to rant today about Star Wars. It may be the Jameson talking, but I had to say this. All right, people, I'm going to give it to you straight. I may be only 38, but I've known Star Wars since 83, and my father had them on bootleg VHS tapes. You know what? My first experience on home video was bootleg Star Wars. I've watched them forever. I've had almost every EU book on tape, and growing up, I've made my own stories with my now non-existent 3 3/4 Star Wars action figure collection. But I love everything Star Wars. Yes, the new trilogy lacks plot and story, but seriously, would y'all have to watch a movie about the Wills and midi-chlorians? Probably not. If it had great characters and a great story, I would. I like the prequels. I like the sequels. Rogue One is my favorite Disney Star Wars movie. My favorite character is Han Solo, and guess what? I cried when Harrison Ford died in The Force Awakens. Did I think they should make a Solo movie? No. Did I enjoy the Solo movie? Hell yeah. Why? Because it's fucking Star Wars. Now, you can say I'm a fucking idiot and I don't care, but if you hate the Disney Star Wars, did you buy Disney Plus for The Mandalorian? Yes. I don't hate Disney Star Wars, but I let the fan hate kill my excitement for anything new. I used to be only excited for Jedi Fallen Order and Kenobi, but since I'm a collector of Black Series figures, I'm excited for the Rise of Skywalker. Here's the sentence. I'm truly for the negativity as of late. You know what? Rant over. Words of wisdom. Pass on what you have learned. Strength, mastery, but weakness, folly, failure also. Yes, failure most of all. The greatest teacher failure is, Luke, we are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters. Well, Mark, that's a quick letter. And, I have to say this. I'm going to say this right now. I feel my Star Wars erection growing. It's at that pulsing 45-degree upturned point of view. How about that for a sex metaphor? Yeah, I feel the blood rushing to my loins as Star Wars is approaching. The Mandalorian, we're less than a month away now, people. We are less than a month away from the Mandalorian, and I can feel, I thought I was impotent. I thought I had erectile dysfunction when it came to Star Wars, and I'm happy to report I do not. I feel the blood engorging my member. I'm very excited about this. I feel the Mandalorian is gonna do me up right. It's gonna have its way with me. I think the Mandalorian is gonna have its way with me. And Rise of Skywalker, I'm happy to get into it. I think I'm gonna pull out from the garage. I am gonna pull out my Randy Cooper Star Destroyer. I'm gonna drill some holes and fill it with fiber optics, if you know what I'm saying. And I think all of us, rather than bitch and moan and complain, I understand you didn't like Last Jedi. I get it. But we got Mandalorian coming down the pike, and we've got Rise of Skywalker. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we got 2 full months of Star Wars deliciousness, and I want to enjoy it. I think we all should all enjoy it. The same way that, as was suggested, you can park. When I say that we all park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, I understand. I get it that the shuttle bay is in the rear of the Enterprise. I understand that. But also, if you think about the Enterprise D, there's shuttle bays on the between the secondary and primary hull. So that metaphor doesn't always work, and that's not how I meant it. I didn't mean it like a banana in the tailpipe kind of a metaphor. I did not. A shuttle bay can be anywhere. It can be on a space station. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a Constitution class heavy cruiser. I'm just saying. But I think we should all be excited about Star Wars. We're getting The Mandalorian, which by all accounts is supposed to be great, and we're getting Rise of Skywalker. So I want to turn on the Star Wars excitement. I think everybody should. I think it's exciting. And it's good that it's happening. I think so. Isn't it? Aren't you guys all ready to go? Aren't you guys and girls and gentle beings and members of this? Don't you want Star Wars to have its way with you again? Anthony Gonzalez says, considering your mother's Vegas connections, did you ever meet James Darren, aka Vic Fontaine? Asks Anthony Gonzalez. You know what, Anthony? I did not meet James Darren. I don't know if she ever had contact with him. What Anthony Gonzalez is referring to is, as many people know, early on, I did a Robservations about the fact that I met my biological sister and my biological mother. And I met my sister and mother when I was 29. And my biological mother turned out to be the director of production at the MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas. And she passed away a couple of years, actually 4 or 5 years after I had met her. Unfortunately, she was very young, in her early 50s. But while I met her, Vegas was my town. Did she hook me up? It was great. It was a great time. But I never got to meet James Darren for all the kind of freebies and crazy stuff that went on. Because of my mom, I never met James Darren. I met James Darren at conventions and things. He's a great guy, a great man. By the way, one of the early on, someone asked about 60s or TV shows. What they didn't have on their list, as an aside, was any of the Irwin Allen shows. They didn't have Time Tunnel. Speaking of James Darren, Time Tunnel, Village of the Giants, and Time Tunnel, Village of the Giants. Why am I drawing a blank on the other one? I forget. Well, Time Tunnel and Village of the Giants. There you go. You got to check out those. You have to, don't you? I mean, you absolutely have to check out those. I'll tell you what. I'm tired and hungry. And the Seahawks won. I think this has been a rollicking chat. And I want to thank everybody for being here. This was, of course, Robservations number 247 with you, the members of the Post-Geek Singularity. We've had many different topics covered. I want to thank you. If you want to write me letters, please go to the website, theburnetwork.net. Participate there. I will announce I'm having a new column on the website. I can announce it. I'm going to just go ahead and announce it today. It's called The Feminerd Gaze. The Feminerd Gaze, and it is written by Allie State, who is on Twitter. She is getting her master's in journalism. And Allie State is going to be writing a weekly column called The Feminerd Gaze. And her first column, I said, okay, well, what would you like to write about? She actually wrote a piece on Batman, the animated series. And I'm like, okay, that's good for me. So look for the Feminerd Gaze this coming week on the Burnettwork website, burnettwork.net. Hopefully that'll be the first of many different columns. I've had a lot of people approach me with ideas, people that want to do video things, and I'm going to perhaps be adding some new shows under the Burnettwork umbrella, which I'm excited to talk about in the future. So that's happening. Anyway, I want to thank all of you imagination connoisseurs, everybody that supports the channel at the Burnettwork.net website here on the channel. I want to thank my moderators, Greg, Detective Jim, Terry, and of course, the Honorable Mr. Mike Bodden. I've got great moderators. I want to thank you, members of the Post-Geek Singularity, for being the way you are, that when I bring up Matango, the mushroom people, that you guys immediately go to Mandingo. That's why I like all of you. And you know a little bit about Dino De Laurentiis and your film history. So, and Paramount. So I want to thank you for that. And I will say always, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. If you like these chats, please subscribe. Please hit the little bell so you know when I'm going on. I will be on the John Campea show tomorrow. And I will be back here, even though, yes, it is a holiday. It's Columbus Day. So I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of op-ed pieces about why we shouldn't celebrate Columbus Day anymore. I understand. I do. So by the way, somebody said, yes, my Izod shirt. I haven't worn this in a long time. So I want to thank you all for being here. And I will once again say, first of all, go Hawks. And I will say, have a better day.